Did you know the average American has $38,000 in personal debt, over $6,800 in credit card debt, over $31,000 in student loan debt, and on top of that, the average American borrows over $32,000 for new cars and over $20,000 for used cars, and that's not even mentioning medical debt or mortgages. If you ever find yourself in this situation, or you have more debt than you feel comfortable with and you want it gone as easily as possible, here are the steps you will need to take. First, it is important to take inventory of what debt you have, where did it come from, and how much it's costing you. And this can be done by simply making a list of everything you owe with all the balances and interest rates. And even though this might not seem like an important first step to paying down your debt, it can be the most difficult because it's where you will begin to see the extent of your debt. Most people who are deep in debt don't always know exactly where all the debt came from. I mean, sure, it's easy to throw the big ticket items like my car broke down, but chances are that's only a fraction of the total debt. Because of this, you want to begin tracking your money, and I mean really tracking everything down to the last penny. Keep track of everything that comes into your bank account and everything that leaves. You even need to write down what you spend in cash. I know for me, when I got started tracking all of my income and expenses, I would slack off and not keep track of every single expense, and this was especially true with cash transactions, because it was a lot easier to forget than when I used my credit card and the purchase would appear on my statement. Keeping track of your expenses is important because when you spend $5 on a latte, then $10 on McDonald's, and $3 for a parking meter, they don't seem like large amounts, so you just assume that those few dollars isn't going to make a difference and you won't end up broke over it. But when you're spending small amounts every day, they really begin to add up over a month or a year. Now, I'm not saying you should never buy Starbucks again, but maybe instead of going to Starbucks every day, you go every other day or maybe just once a week, and with the money you will be saving, you can begin throwing more money at your debt and bringing those balances down faster. For example, let's say you buy Starbucks every day and you spend an average of $5. Well, in a year, you will be spending $1,835, but if you cut back to one Starbucks per week, then you will only be spending $260 a year. So just by doing that one thing, you have an extra $1,565 that can go towards paying down debt. Now imagine how much money you could be saving every year from cutting back on all your unnecessary expenses. So once you begin tracking your expenses and saving, you can focus on paying down your debt, and there are two main methods that work best. The first one is called the debt snowball method, which was made popular by Dave Ramsey, and then the second method is called the Avalanche Method. With the debt snowball method, you will pay off your debt starting with the smallest and ending with the largest. Now, this method will not save you as much money on interest as the debt avalanche method will, but it does motivate you to continue paying off debt because you quickly begin to see progress and feel like you are accomplishing something. With this method, step 1 will be to list your debts starting with the one that has the lowest balance and ending with the highest balance, regardless of the interest rate. Step 2 is to make the minimum payments on all your debts except the one with the smallest balance, which is number 1 on the list you just made. Step 3 is to pay as much as possible on your smallest balance, and then in step 4, you simply repeat the process until you are debt free. Now let's use some numbers to help you understand this better. Let's say you have the following debts: student loan of $12,000, credit card number 1 with a balance of $1,500, a medical bill of $500, credit card number 2 with a balance of $4,000, and a personal line of credit with a balance of $9,000. Using these numbers, we will list the debts from smallest to largest without paying attention to the interest rate. So at the top of the list will be the medical bill. Next we have credit card number 1, then we have credit card number 2, next is the personal line of credit, and finally the student loan. Now let's say the first debt has a minimum payment of $45, the second debt has a minimum payment of $50, the third debt has a minimum payment of $55, the fourth debt has a minimum payment of $110, and finally the last debt has a minimum payment of $130. So the debt snowball method says you should make the minimum payments on all your debts except the one with the lowest balance, and for that debt you will pay as much as you can. So for debt number 2, 3, 4, and 5, you will make the minimum payments, but let's say this month you can afford to pay $200 towards the medical bill. So now your balance for that debt is only $300, and next month you will make the minimum payment on all your debts except the one at the top, just like you did before. But now let's assume you work some overtime and this month you can't pay $300 towards the medical bill. So now that debt is completely gone and you don't ever have to worry about it again. So once the debt at the top of the list has been paid off, you can move on to the second debt and you will repeat the process until that debt has been paid off. Then you can move on to the second debt and you will continue the same process until you are debt free. The main and biggest advantage of using the snowball method is the psychological boost you receive. When you see your debt begin to go away, it will increase your motivation to continue paying it off even if it's only the smallest debt that is getting paid off. This strategy can also help you get a better grip on your finances and reduce your stress, because by focusing on the smallest debt, the snowball method eliminates worry about how to tackle all of your debt at once. Now there are some disadvantages with using this method, and the main one is that you can end up paying more interest because the snowball method focuses on paying the smallest debt first versus the debts with the highest interest rates. So if you are someone who is concerned about how much more you will pay in interest, then you should take inventory of all your debt and make some rough calculations of how much more you will end up paying if you use the snowball method. And if it's too much, then you should consider the debt avalanche method. And the reason the debt avalanche method will save you money is because it prioritizes paying off the debts with the highest APR. So with the debt avalanche method, the first step is to list your debts, beginning with those that have the highest rates and ending with those that have the lowest rates. Then once you have your debt sorted out, you will make the minimum payment on everything except the debt at the top of the list. And for this debt, you will pay as much as possible until that debt is paid off. And this is the same as with the debt snowball method, but the only difference is the debt at the top of the list is now the debt with the highest APR. And when the debt at the top of the list has been paid off, you will move on to the debt with the second highest APR and you will pay as much money as possible towards that debt until it has been paid off, while you're still making the minimum payments on everything else. And then you just repeat the process until you are debt free. Now let's use some numbers to help you understand this better. Let's say you have the following debts: student loan of $12,000 with a rate of 5%, credit card number 1 with a balance of $2,500 and a rate of 22%, a car loan of $15,000 with a rate of 3.5%, credit card number 2 with a balance of $6,000 and a rate of 19%, and finally a personal line of credit for $9,000 with a rate of 13%. So using these numbers, we will list the debts starting with the one that has the highest rate and ending with the one that has the lowest rate. So at the top of the list will be credit card number 1, next is credit card number 2, third is the personal line of credit, next is the student loan, and finally the car loan. So just as you would in the snowball method, you will begin making the minimum payments on all the debts except the one at the top of the list, and for that one, you will pay as much as possible. The only difference here is that you will be paying more towards the debt with the highest rate and not the one with the smallest balance. So after your top debt is paid off, you move on to the second highest and so on until you are debt free. Now the advantage of using the avalanche method is that you will be saving money on interest by paying off the most expensive debt first. Now if you only use logic and math, then the best repayment method for debt is the avalanche method. But since we're not always logical and there are psychological factors involved, you should really consider which method will work best for you. Some people will have more success if they focus on the smaller debt first, because every time a debt has been paid off, they will feel a sense of accomplishment and pride, which will motivate you to stick with their debt repayment strategy. So even if you end up paying more in interest in the short term by using the snowball method, that is better than never paying off your debt, because by staying in debt, you will end up paying much more money in interest over time. So whether you decide to go with the snowball method or the avalanche method, the choice is up to you, and you should go with the method that you will have the most success with. But at the end of the day, neither of these choices will work unless you take the first step to becoming debt free. Then once you take the first step, you must keep the ball rolling, because only sticking with it for a month or two is not going to change anything. So if you're serious about becoming debt free, sit down and go over how much debt you have, where it came from, and put together a plan for how you're going to pay it off. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video or you found any of this information helpful, it would really help me if you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.